Hello. I am gloriously on my phone's internet because my Wi Fi has decided it doesn't love me. So I am hoping that it is not too horrifying. Please tell me if you're struggling to hear me or if I'm lagging very much or so on. Okay, so I wanted to go live today and discuss kind of where we're at. We after the Kickstarter and kind of the year ahead and behind and all the rest of that. Hey, Epic, thanks for that. So the Kickstarter was fantastic, and it's been successfully funded. It met all the funding goals. Honestly, it exceeded my expectations by a lot, which has been amazing. And I'm obviously now very hard at work at editing world building blueprints, and getting the artwork done, and talking to the artists, and so on, and preparing for layouts. And the book is now with the editor, for grammar and so on and so forth. Okay, so that was a great experience. And I'm definitely going to be writing more world building blueprints. I have started, as you know, with a season 2 of the podcast already, and that will be about towns. So in season 2 and in the second book of World Building Blueprints, it'll be how to build towns, and it'll cover, creating a government for a town, factions in a town, the kind of black market of a town, the kind of underworld of a town, integrating fantasy into it, dealing with, like, fantastical species in a town, the architecture around a town, how to layer your architecture in general to give the town a kind of older feel or a younger feel. So all of that will be coming in World Building Blueprints, in the podcast, and in the book. About the main channel, about the main content of the channel, because everything is one channel, I am a little concerned. And I'll tell you why. Last year, I started shooting the lights out with the politics content. I have that one, 5 mistakes people make with politics, that has 87,000 views, and it just, I was getting 1,000 subscribers a month, and it was really, blossoming. Hi, Laura, good to see you. And the problem is that since then, that has dipped again. Now, it's not that the videos are performing atrociously, but they're not performing well. Okay, and this is, I mean, I've tried a number of things. I've tried to use other people to create thumbnails for me. I'm now trying to use my face in thumbnails again to kind of, and the reason why I do it is not because I think my face is famous, because obviously it isn't. But the reason why I use my face is this is not a face generated by AI. No AI is going to generate this face. So I'm hoping that it shows that there's a real person doing real videos, and that it's not AI slop being shown in the videos, which is why I'm now trying my face out and so on. But hey, Katie, good to see you. But I am a little concerned about the dip, both in subscribers and views. I still have videos that get over 1,000 views and so on, but I'm not getting that shoot the lights out kind of videos. So, and part of that might be that I haven't this year looked at politics at all very much, and politics in world building does seem to be a niche. So I'm going to make a few videos about politics and about cultures and so on, and see if it's just a content problem. Like, is my niche really that people love the politics content and they love the kind of culture content and that kind of detailed content, rather than, say, the content related to general world building? It used to be at one point, like, my biomes videos did very well, and so, like, I guess it's a kind of shift in people's approaches and so on. So I'm not throwing in the towel or anything like that. I'm just stating my concerns. But I have been running the channel for 5 years, and YouTube's algorithm's got this funny thing where if your old content is performing better than your new content, they start like mothballing your channel, right? Whi- which which is really bad for channels like mine that have got evergreen content, because people go back and watch my old content often, which is great. Please don't stop doing it. I love it. But it does, if the new videos don't do as well, then the YouTube algorithm gets all antsy, right? Which is why I'm now trying the thumbnail things and all the rest of that jazz. Thanks, Latina. So I'm, as I say, like I'm not. This is not a giving up. This is nothing. I'm just playing open cards here. But what I am going to do is I'm going to create. And now the thing is as well, like I in no way want to step away from YouTube. But I also like need to play with the algorithms and with the way that they work and so on. So what I am going to do is I'm going to create a hey Kay, no problem. And yeah, so I'm just talking about the state of the channel and so on. And basically, I while I am happy with where just-in-time world building is right now, and I have no plans to stop it, I am going to create a secondary channel where I will drop a video once a month, where I'm going to do deep dives into fantasy content. Now, the reason why I decided to do that as a channel is because I was thinking, okay, so if I do have to create a secondary channel, just in case, YouTube does do funny things with the algorithm and they start kind of mothballing my content because my old content outperforms my new content, and the YouTube algorithm's funny like that, then the content I can most easily produce while still running just-in-time world building is fantasy and philosophy combined, right? It's like this is the philosophical stakes and the themes and the thesis of this book, and kind of the things we can learn from it from a philosophical and moral perspective, and then take that as a one book or one TV series a month and do like a really deep dive into it. So I actually filmed the first one of those yesterday, and that will go out next week Saturday on a brand new channel that has pretty much no one on it. um, so so it'll be called, actually, it is that deep, because I thought that was funny. And it'll dive into specifically into philosophy and so on. So the first video that I filmed on that was on how Cashil's darts lovers thou wilt philosophy is actually a Stoic philosophy. It actually ties into Stoicism. So that video will go out next week, Saturday, and then I will just drop one video a month on that channel, because I feel like I can do that. Like I can manage that one extra video a month, while still maintaining just-in-time world building, and then it gives me a little bit of like variety and backup in case, as I say, in case YouTube starts penalizing me for having evergreen content. It's insane, right? They want you to have evergreen content, but not too much. Just like a Goldilocks number of evergreen content. Anyway, so yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with the channel. Yeah, and yeah, Latino's 100% right. The YouTube algorithm does penalize channels that have too much variety in them. And the problem with world building is it's such a massive body of work. Like I just, you know, I've spoken about spinning. Like I've spoken about cooking. I've spoken about all kinds of things on this channel as it relates to fantasy world building. And of course, the YouTube algorithm doesn't quite know what to do with that. And I mean, that's fine. Like I'm not bitching about it. I think, I've done well here, but I am going to try and like also on just in time world building, I am going to try and do at least one culture focused or politics focused, like fantasy politics, not real world politics. No one wants any of us to go there. So, fantasy politics video once a month, and to see if that kind of like just gets the algorithm to get back into that rhythm of recommending my content to the right places. um Yeah, but I think philosophy and fantasy make a fascinating mix, and I wouldn't want to talk about actual philosophy. Like, I don't want to stand up and talk about Camus or Kierkegaard in isolation, right? Because I don't know enough about those guys. Like, I don't, I'm not a continental philosophy specialist or anything like that. So, but I do know enough about philosophy to tie it into fantasy themes and to talk about kind of what the author was doing in the book and so on. So yeah. um Laura, this is not the ideal shape for doing TikTok dances. I won't go viral like that. um Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. Katie says that, no actual human being is running the algorithm. That's 100% true. You're kind of trying to work with a algorithm, that's run by a machine, that's run on rules no one like fully is behind. I mean, the devs have put rules in place, but they're weird rules and not always accurate. So, um, yeah. So yeah. So I'm you'll be getting just in time world building content, just the same as normal. There's a video every Tuesday that drops. That's the main video of the channel, and then on Saturdays there's either a short or a live stream, or the World Building Blueprints podcast drops on the channel. That won't change. There'll now be just that one extra channel, extra one. My shape is not conducive to belly dancing. I am built square and blocky and weigh too much. So, um, but yeah, so that's the overall plan there. And then in terms of just, in terms of like how often the content drops and so on, what I'm trying to do with the scheduling is I try to like film, say, 2 months worth of shorts all in one go, right? So they all go up and they're available to channel members immediately, of course, but they kind of peter out, they kind of go out over the course of 2 months. And then what I'm trying to get into the habit of is filming 4 videos on one day, and that is the month's content. They go out to channel members immediately, and then they're scheduled for release over the course of the month. So if you see the like members first, it generally means it's going to be dropping sometime within the next month. And then I do two live streams, one for members only and one for everyone. Yeah. So, so that is the general content schedule. Um, yeah, absolutely, guys. Hit me up with the what you would like me to read and analyze and do these philosophies on. I'm going to start with the content I know best, just to get into the rhythm of it. But then I'm absolutely going to start, reading what people recommend and doing deep dives. Yes. Mythology creation is fantastic, in general. I've done a few mythology videos because one of them did really well, like how to myth. One of the first videos I created on the channel did really well, but the others never really took off, and I'm at a loss why. I don't know if it's the thumbnail, I don't know if it's the title. Anyway, so, but yeah. Um, And then Kimbu says, Victoria Goddard's Hands of the Emperor. I am happy to give it a read and spin it off onto the second channel. So I think the second channel will also be great just for those discussions around content, and I'm not going to limit it just to books. I'll also do like, TV series or movies or whatever. Though if there's a book and a TV series, then I'll do the book because, generally speaking, the TV series does not have the nuance of the book, especially not in epic fantasy. Um, uh, you all just want to see me dancing, I swear. um, yeah, I released a whole bunch of shorts today about the fantasy genres, discuss, various topics and tropes and so on, which are, which I enjoy doing. Yeah, looking forward to you catching up with them, Husio. Um, when did I decide I want to be an author? So actually, that's a little bit of a funny story. I so I wrote my first book when I was like 18, right? And hey, but Biomitador, I haven't been seeing your flower in the comments. So but it was terrible. Like, bless my English teacher's heart, she did not tell me it was terrible. She was very encouraging, but looking back at that book now, it was atrocious. But she did encourage me and so on. But I didn't feel like the book was that great. It was very derivative. Anyway, so I then went into role playing in a very big way at university, and and I I became first a player and then a game master. Then I became a LARP runner. So I ran those big live action games where people go and camp for the weekend. I ran them for like between 100 and 150 players, where I built like with the rest of the plot team, built a world and like ran multiple storylines and did all of that. So I went into role playing very, very heavily and GMing and games mastering and so on. And that's where I really kind of sharpened my role play, my kind of world building skills and my ability to put together a plot, right? And then I decided to move to Finland from South Africa, and that was it was an economic decision. I wasn't coping in South Africa for a variety of reasons. Some of it my fault, some of it the economic environment. And I moved to Finland in 2020. I landed in Finland 2 weeks before the borders closed. Not actually joking. The COVID hit, like, I landed and 2 weeks later there was COVID and the borders were closed and we were all in our houses and told not to go into work. So I could still work because I'm a computer developer by trade, but I was stuck in my house with no outlet and I didn't know anybody, right? I just moved to a new country. So it was a little insane. So I was like, well, okay, listen, you've got to do something to keep your mind from going bananas crazy. So it's like, okay, I have a story that's been drifting around in the back of my head on and off for the past 5 years that I wanted to do as a graphic novel, but then the artist pulled out. So, I mean, I can't draw. So, because the artist pulled out, I was like, well, let me just write the thing as a novel because I'm sitting here inside my house, and I'm unable to go out and make friends. And then there we go. And I started writing, and that was Hidden Blade. So that was the first book that I wrote was a COVID book. And then I reached the end of that year, and I was like, okay, am I going to publish? Am I going to try and get this published? Am I going to, what am I going to do? And then ultimately, I decided to start the YouTube channel and self-publish, and here we are. So that's how I decided to become an author. It was COVID. I I am an author because of COVID. Um, yeah, I love world building for role playing. there is the difference between world building for books and world building for role playing lies in the characters, right? In your um, when you're world building for role playing, you have to world build in such a way that you leave plot threads dangling, right? That your players can grab onto, that their little monkey paws can get into, and they can, pick what adventure they're going to go on. That's the art of world building for a role playing setting and game, is to leave all these dangling threads. But if you're world building for a novel, okay, you need to create a character that the reader can latch on to, because in a role-playing session, the players bring characters they already love. You only need to provide the world. But in a book, you need to make the reader love the character. And that's the big difference between world building for a book and world building for role playing, in my experience. Yeah. And yeah, Epic, it was 100% the silver lining. Like I would not want would not want that year back, but I don't regret starting the channel and so on. So yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, one needed to do something with all that time you suddenly had, or you would go off your head and start doing weird stuff. So, um, yeah, so in my world building, I it depends. So I it depends on the concept. So if I have a very strong character in my head, like with Louis with Hidden Blade, I knew the character before I knew the world. I knew the character before I really knew the story. The character was born in my head from scratch. Um, and so the world really grew up around Louis. The world exists in the way it does to explain why Louis is the way he is, right? Rather than anything else. I mean, there's more to the world than just Louis, but that was how things started out. That was how the empire came to have assassins that run around and do stuff, and why the magic system is the way it is, so that nobles actually have to get their own hands dirty and so on. But then, like in the book series that I'm working on now, which is set in that same world, I started with the cultures because I already have the cultures. And then I built the characters out of that in order to create the story that I want to create now. So it depends a little bit on where I am in the creative process. Yeah, exactly, Werbus. In RPGs, you do not need to care for designing the main characters because the players will bring those. All you have to do is create the plot for them. Um, how can we infuse our world building with historical references? So, I mean, okay. If you mean in your book, if you mean in a book, you're not going to be liable. All right. No one's going to sue you for using Genghis Khan and his Mongolian horde. But I guess the question here is more like, how do you do that while still maintaining kind of that you're not trampling on somebody else's culture? Because that's really the thing, right? The thing about using real world cultures, and I mean, I use real world cultures all the time. So I am not even remotely suggesting that you don't use real world cultures. I absolutely advocate for it. But um, the thing about using real world cultures is real world cultures have nuance. Okay. Every single real world culture has got complexities and complications and differences. Like, I'll give you an example, right? Afghanistan is one of the strictest patriarchal cultures in the world, hands down. Okay, no argument. And they have the concept of girls being boys if the family has no boys in them. So they designate one of the girls to be a boy until she reaches puberty so that she can accompany her sisters, his sisters, and provide a male escort, right, for like the rest of the family. um and I mean, obviously it creates, massive, like, almost, I guess, gender trauma in a way for these girls when they then get told, at some point, that they have to go back to being girls. But there is weirdness and nuance in every culture on earth, even cultures that from the outside look like a monolith, right? And if you're going to use a culture, like if you're going to use Genghis Khan for your orc culture, 100% do that. But understand the nuances about the Mongolian culture. Like, understand their cultural practice. They had a fascinating cultural practice where they would take hostages of, like, the people they conquered, but those hostages would come into the Khan's court and they would serve the Khan as honored advisors, and thus they would learn the Mongolian ways, right? They would be incorporated into Mongolia. And then when those hostages returned to their own culture, they took reverence for the Khan and for the Mongolian ways with them, and that cemented the empire. So use Mongolia, but use nuances and tricks like that. Don't just make them, orcs rampaging evilly on horses, as like the basis. Like, that's how I would say that the trick is. It's not about, like, um you have to only use nice cultures, or you have to make all cultures nice, or whatever, but use the parts of their culture that are nuanced and that are complex. Don't just, display this kind of one hat or one stroke kind of culture, if that makes sense. So I hope that explains. Hope that explains my approach. um Yeah, so I also normally just create factions and politics and so on, and then, like, let my players run wild and see where they go. Um, yeah, you can also do this, what Latino suggested over here. Just examine how the Canaanite political economy was structured and use that same structure for your fictional society without using the Mongolian imagery. So without, like, putting the hats and the tents and this and so on and so forth. You can make up your own symbols and so on, and kind of make them in another way. So yeah, there's, like, but just when you use another culture, like, respect that culture. Approach that culture from a point of respect, even if it's a culture that you would never want to live in. Like, I've borrowed from many cultures that I do not ever want to live in, right? I don't ever want to live in strict patriarchal cultures, or in Afghanistan, or, but I have borrowed from these cultures. And when I research them with as open a mind as I can manage, and I respect their identity as a culture, right? And I try to bring that to my writing, to bring that respect to my writing. Because, it's not like their culture is their culture. It's not my culture, but that doesn't mean that I get to treat them with disrespect. Um, yeah. Long story short. Um, Other questions, guys? Anyone? Like, um, I have been researching like a crazy woman on towns for world building blueprints. So I went plunging back into Bronze Age history and how we develop towns and cities and all the rest of that, and that's been fun. I've also been so part of World Building Blueprints is I have committed to building a world using the book. So I decided to use the Mesopotamian demon bowls and to combine that with a Bronze Age culture. So that creates, of course, a problem because there was not enough writing to create the demon bowls during the Bronze Age, right? Because we just learned to start writing during the Bronze Age. So I'm now kind of wrestling with what do I need to tweak in order to make um, the writing process come faster, right? So that the writing process will um, actually like kick off here and be available during the Bronze Age, and so that I can have these demon bowls earlier. So that's been a fun exercise, and I'm currently still racking my brains exactly how I want to do this, because what I don't want to do, despite the fact that demons are real, what I don't want to do is I don't want to have um, the gods having taught humanity how to read, because this is a pet peeve. You do not have to follow me down this road. I'm not saying anything, but I freaking hate the Atlantis myth. I hate it so much. I despise the Atlantis myth. You and me and everybody are the product of 5 billion years of evolution. We do not need no stinking gods to teach us how to read. Like we are exceptional in our apex predatorhood. We can learn how to read our very own selves and figure out how to pay taxes because of it, or pay taxes, and that's why we learned how to read. But anyway, so so I have a hatred for that, like um that you the gods teach us how to read and so on. And I know we all have, like, everybody has legends like that. It's not just Atlantis, like all of the Bronze Age have myths like that, but I don't want that to be real in the world that I write. I want people to have developed writing themselves. So yeah. um So my rant about why I dislike the Atlantis myth. um, I am a little bit familiar with Wuxia authors, um, but it's not wholly my genre. So I haven't read a lot in that genre specifically. Um, Yeah, Mesopotamian demonology is amazing. Like, there's a channel on YouTube, Esotericism, which I freaking love. I love that guy, um, Dr. Sledge. His content is so good and so well researched. Really, really fantastic. Um, Of course, you have creative room. Epic, you have all the creative room. Okay. You can take a real world culture and change it. You can take a culture and combine it. Um, uh, Raymond E. Feist was asked which cultures he drew on for inspiration for the Tsurani, right? Which are a culture in his world. And he said he combined the Japanese culture with the Zulu culture, which is not what you would call natural bedfellows, right? In order to, and of course, some purely fantasy elements, in order to create the Tsurani culture. So you can combine cultures. You can make stuff up. You can add fantasy elements. You can go bananas. Just make sure that you understand each culture that you're borrowing from, and that you're not just, kind of taking the top layer. That you're not just yeah, that you do some research into them and understand that culture, and come at them from a place of understanding and respect. Um, yeah, Guy and I go back a long, long way, a long way. The South African role playing community is not that big, so we met there, and then he was part of the live action role play game that I ran. He was one of the players there quite often, and so on. So, um, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But, yeah, so, the book, by the way, while it is still in Kickstarter now, well, it's out of Kickstarter, but it's available for late pledges. So it'll remain available for late pledges until we go to print, and after that, there will be copies available on my website. I'm actually going to that's the other news, a couple of things I'm gonna be doing. I'm going to be dropping these T-shirt merch. They've never sold. My channel isn't really good for that. So I'm gonna tank that side, the spring side, and instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sell my books, including World Building Blueprints, directly from my website. So I'm gonna put up a little e-commerce store there, and you'll be able to buy my books from me, while stock lasts, and they'll still be available in Amazon if you really want to buy through Amazon. And the delivery will be done by the same guys I'm using for the Kickstarter and so on. So, yeah. So World Building Blueprints will be available in both paperback and hardback and the PDF, and the EPUB on my site. So, um, I have watched Dragon Ball and I've watched Naruto. I have not read the Condor trilogy, so I will put that on my list. But I watched Naruto back in the 2000s, I think. The early 2000s, when it was coming out, back when we still pirated, TV series before we had streaming. So, um, I certainly can. Sure. Hit me up on the. Let me see. How do I make that happen? Um, if Epic, uh, hit me up on the Discord. Hit me up on the Discord server, Epic. Hirumanjiru, Hiruma Injiru. Um, if you are not in my Discord server, hop into my Discord server, and so that we can figure out address and so on. And Epic, I will make some kind of a late reward or something in in available. So, um, or we can figure it out through my website, or through Ko-fi or something like that, and get the thing out there. Because I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter if we do it through Kickstarter or we do it separately, because it's all perfectly funded. Thank you very much to all of you who contributed to that. It was very validating. It was very validating. Um, so, yeah. Um, yeah, guys, if you're not on my Discord, you should be. There, I'll put a link in the description, and let me grab a link. Uh, I'll grab a link quickly from. I think I've got. I think I still have a link on my website to the Discord. I don't want to generate a new a new link to the Discord, because if I do, then I have to go and update the freaking link wherever it is in other places, and that's painful. So, so yeah, so I prefer not to generate new links and just to grab. Um, Oh, I know. I'm gonna have to go hunt for the Discord link, or take a risk on generating a new one. Um, there it is. Okay, here we go. Yes, you can absolutely post it. Oh, your mad mother. There we go. That's easy. Um, so I'm not planning on opening more for this World Building Blueprints, but they'll be there again for the next Kickstarter. So one of the things, about opening up that architecture tier for the VIP tier is obviously that it is a limited supply. I only have X number of people I can accommodate to read their world, understand their world, and then offer meaningful content. So yeah, that's why that is limited. Um, so why you chose world building? Oh, why? Oh, okay. So when I decided to do the channel, I was like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And I was like, okay, what are the things I know? Like, I know very well. I know coding, not relevant. You don't want to listen to me yap about computer science. Okay. I know philosophy, but not well enough to talk about it. I know history, but you need to cite sources for history. And I would have to go back and read a lot of historical books and get back into it. So, not a good option. And then, and obviously, there's a whole bunch of authors who talk about writing, but I was like, I am not confident in my own writing skills. Like, I am not confident that I can yap about writing and then tell people buy my book. And then they read my book and they're like, but this is atrocious. Like, what is wrong with you? Why would you talk about writing when you can't even write? So I was like, okay. I need something that I'm really confident in. And I could have done fantasy reviews, but I felt like the market for fantasy reviews was quite saturated. Like, there's quite a lot of fantasy reviewers. So I was like, let me talk about world building. I am confident in my world building skills. Like, I I might not be the world's best writer, I might not be the world's best plotter, I might not create the greatest characters, but I know for a fact that I build solid worlds. Like, I am absolutely confident in my world building skills. So that's why I chose world building as a channel topic. I was like, I can talk forever about it. I love it. I'm interested in it, and I'm confident in my skills. So, so yeah. Um, yes. So this actually, I I've been a lot of things in my life. Um, I got promoted in my last job, and that was part of the problem, like, to be honest with you, because I am really good at writing code. I am I am not good with people. And I know, like, I'm talking to all of you and I seem fine, but I'm not good with managing people. I don't have that kind of mindset. And, and they promoted me out of development into first team lead, then into development manager, and then into general manager with a massive P&L figure. P&L figure means profit and loss figure, and a team of 40 developers and a boss in Japan, and it was insane. I was so freaking bad. Okay, I wasn't that bad at the job, but the problem was I was bad at managing people, and you can't be bad at managing people in that kind of job. And I read, but as in trying to get better at this freaking stupid job that made me horrifyingly depressed, to be honest with you, I read a whole boatload of books about just-in-time development and about, like, the Toyota way of management, and so many management books. Anyway, long story short, I really did like the just-in-time method of Toyota, like the way that they manage their supply chain. So when I created my channel, I was like, this is what I want people to understand. You don't have to front load the whole world. You can just create your world elements as you need them, as long as you have a strong vision for what the world should be, as long as you understand your North Star of your world, because then everything will feel like it fits together well, despite being created just in time. I mean, if Toyota could do it with cars, we can do it with worlds. It just needs a little bit of, effort. So, um, um, build what you need when you need. Yes, build what you need when you need it. Exactly, exactly. Um, how concrete are your creative goals when you start a story? I have a very strong idea of where I want to go with a story, because without that vision, I struggle to world build. Like with Louis, I knew that thematically, I wanted the story to be about the ends justifying the means, and where do you draw the line, right? The first story. And I wanted the overall theme to be about, how do you outgrow your past trauma? How do you move on from what came before? How do we heal? Can we grow to be more than our past? And so understanding that that was my thematic goals with the story is what helped me make sure that the world supports that thematic goal. The world is built to lift them up. So yeah. So that, I hope that answers the question. So I do try to understand what is the thing that I'm trying to tell the story of. Um Yes, exactly. The the Toyota model, the Kaizen officer, all of that stuff. So I read the crap out of the Toyota model as part of this freaking general manager role. Um, so yeah. It's what inspired me to say, this is a good world building model as well. It'll help you to not boil the ocean. It'll help you to understand what you're doing, when you're doing it, and, organically create your world in time to use in your story, not trying to front load the whole thing. And the odd thing is, like, people say Tolkien world built for 20 years, and he absolutely did. And yet, despite all that, he was absolutely also world building as he wrote, right? Because he's got those letters going forward and backward about like things that he was like, well, I thought I was going to do this with Galadriel, but then I decided to do this instead, and now I'm doing blah, right? Because world building is dynamic. The world isn't like ours, that takes, you can't just like go and be like, okay, well, I'm going to change the past to better fit in with what I'm doing here in the future, but because obviously it's a non-existent world. It's a story world. It lives in your imagination, and thus you have that kind of control. The only time when you're limited in the changes you can make is when you have printed the canon. If it's printed in a physical book, it's canon. You have to work around it at that point. You can't just change it. Please don't just change it. I like, it is my biggest gripe with comic books, and I love comic books. So, they'll just change canon. But you can still work around the canon in order to make it do what you want it to do. Yeah, 100%. Tolkien did all kinds of stuff. Like people, he, I think he wrote like a second edition or something on The Hobbit. Of course, it was back in the day when, you like, there's only so many copies of the book out there and all that. How do you evaluate whether or not to include popular elements and themes? So, okay. So let me first talk about a few things. One, I think there is way too much judgment on authors for like, oh, you missed this thing and you were actually doing blah. Like, I don't like Robert Newcomb's Fifth Sorceress. I find them incredibly misogynistic. I don't know whether Robert Newcomb himself was a misogynist, right? But I find the books misogynistic, and I'm never going to read them, and I'm never going to recommend them. But I don't think like we should force those books to be unpublished or anything like that. Like, if there's an audience for those books, there's an audience for those books. It's like Terry Goodkind. I hate Terry Goodkind's books. Like, for realses, the last book of his that I read, the main character defeated communism by building statues. I can't. I wish I was actually joking. It was so bad. It was basically like Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy made real, right? And it's just, okay, fine. Like, I hate them. That doesn't mean, that, and I find Terry Goodkind to be a particularly objectionable human, but that's because he said things like, I don't write fantasy. I write about the human condition. Like, mate, don't we all? like, like, but so I think he was a pretentious git, but I don't think that means we should try and agitate for his books to be cancelled or whatever. Authors miss things all the time. It happens. You have one thing in your head, it comes out slightly differently. And the other thing to bear in mind is every reader reads your books with their own baggage. Okay? When you approach a book, you are not coming at it from a neutral perspective. You are coming with the experience of your life and your own baggage. And sometimes your baggage matches that book's baggage to perfection. And you are there for that book, right? Because it speaks to where you are at in your life emotionally. And sometimes where you're at, you'll read it and you'll be like, well, this is freaking disgusting, and that's not even a case of the author having put that in the book. It's just a case of like, you at this point in your life, really hard to cope with. Now, all that being said, find yourself a diverse beta group. Okay, I use Critique Circle for this purpose. There's about 20 people who read my content there. And if 20 people who read my content from diverse backgrounds did not pick up massive problematic elements in the story, I'm like, it's okay. It's good to go. The people that it will piss, and I'm certain there are people it'll piss off 100%. Okay. But the people it'll piss off will be in minority, because that's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid pissing off the majority of readers, right? And so you want to avoid, like, treading all over people in that context. So there's that. Then in terms of like popular themes, don't write for popular themes. Themes go in and out of fashion like yo-yos. Write what you want to write. Write the story that you genuinely want to write. Whatever that story is, whatever the meaning behind it is for you, write that story. It'll be far more impactful than writing for a theme or whatever. That would be my recommendation. And yeah, I mean, just be aware that there will be people whose baggage will match poorly with what you've written, and what you're trying to avoid is that everybody's baggage matches poorly. That's really it. So I hope that answered the question. Yeah, don't 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 give in to that pressure. Don't yield to it. I feel like people put too much stock with what happens online. And I mean, I know I live online as well, I have a YouTube channel, whatever. But like, terminally online is different from from people's opinion in the real world. So don't get too terminally online and worry too much about people's opinion. Write the story that's important to you, and have faith that you'll communicate it well, and run it past beta readers, and ask them what themes they took away from it, and take it from there. Not those ridiculous things. Sensitive. Don't use sensitivity readers. That's ridiculous. That just turns your book into a bland piece of nonsense. Use beta readers from diverse backgrounds and ask them what they thought about this, what themes they took away, and so on. What do I think about the North Star analogy? So basically, let's take an example from a example I actually know quite well. Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I would define the North Star as it has a touchstone of My Fair Lady meets a bank heist. Okay, because that's what it is. It's a My Fair Lady story and a bank heist. The core thematic elements is about a revolution. It's about a class revolution. It kind of misses the point of the class revolution, but I think that's that's because Sanderson is perhaps a little bit a little bit not so deep into the class stuff. But it's about a class revolution, right? And the world is set up for what happened if the bad guy won, right? And we're now 1,000 years later. That's essentially what's happened to this world. And then it's that kind of like, how do you fix the situation now? And it's through the lens of a class warfare situation. So with Sangwell Chronicles, I had my themes in mind. And then what I also do is I kind of pick roughly where and what I'm looking for culturally, right? So one of the things I did with Sangwell actually, to get back to Epic's point, is I chose to write the first trilogy in the closest European analog, right? Because the Empire of Lumiaron is on the Sangwil map, it's kind of off in the corner. And I based it on a Europe where the Roman Empire never fell, right? For a variety of reasons and blah, 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 blah. So basically, it's like a advanced kind of Roman Empire structure, roughly speaking, that I used for the Empire of Lumiaron. And the reason why I did that, to get back to Epic's point, is because I was like, okay, I want to make very sure I want to make very sure that I know the culture I'm building for. And secondly, if I write a kind of down the middle of the road book and it really sucks, right? But it's a European culture with a male protagonist, like it's a kind of a vanilla, protagonist and so on. And it really sucks. It'll just vanish into the like huge collection of other stories that have got a similar world and everything else, right? So I won't have to stress about like it's standing out as like, it's representative of gay people and it sucks. So, so I was like, I'll just vanilla, 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 but with uniqueness, right? So that was the kind of birth there. But yeah, so Sangwil had this concept of the Roman Empire and the thematic elements, and I build everything towards that kind of North Star of the story, like where I want the story to go. So in Sangwil, Louis is faced with a line that he shouldn't cross. Okay. And the state of the world hangs in the balance, right? So, or he believes it does. So does he cross that line or does he not cross that line? Does he find his moral heart or doesn't he? And basically the world is built to make that question relevant to him. I hope that helps. And Matador, there is a video where I actually talk about that concept. If you look on my playlists, if you look on my podcasts, right, under the podcast tab on my channel, and look for Worldbuilding Blueprints, the very first episode of season 1. It's the very first episode in that playlist. I talk specifically about how to develop your North Star for your world. So go check that out. I'm probably forgetting like half of what I said in there. I'm getting old. What do I wish male writers wouldn't do when they write women as characters? Actually, this is something I wish all writers wouldn't do. I wish they wouldn't um, focus so much on like it's a this gender or a that gender. And I wish they would just make strong characters with flaws and agency, characters I can get behind. I don't really mind. I have read, I mean, Fedra Nordolone from Jacqueline Carey's Cashel Start is probably my favorite heroine. I mean, those are definitely my favorite books. And she doesn't pick up a sword, right? She's a girly girl. She likes bathing and dressing up pretty, and she she's a courtesan. Like, she's not in any way, shape, or form like a Amazonian warrior woman, but she is a very strong character. My second favorite character is probably Jill from the Devery series, and she absolutely is a warrior woman, right? She has been training with her dad since she was like a wee little lass, and she can handle a sword as well as a man, basically. She's often mistaken for a man. She is very, very competent with a blade. Two very different characters, but I love them both because they have agency. They have strength. They have more going on than being a man or being a woman or being gay or being bisexual, right? They are powerful characters in their own right. And that's what I want most of all. I want powerful characters that jump off the page at me. So I hope that answers the question. Negative character arcs, how to make them satisfying to read. So I've actually been thinking about this recently, and I might do a video during this in-between period on it, on how to write tragedy. I think that if we look at, like, probably the most highly skilled tragic writer, in my opinion, is probably Shakespeare. You know, I'm a big fan of, like, Shakespeare's tragedy. And he made tragedy work for him, right? By essentially providing the tragic characters all of these off ramps. It could have gone so much different, right? Macbeth could just have chosen to remain loyal. You know, Hamlet could have chosen to kill the king while he was kneeling at prayer, and that would have solved the whole problem. Or he could have chosen to walk away from the situation, you know, or he could have, like, there are choices that could have been made that would have changed the outcome. But the character in question is so flawed that they cannot make those choices. So it must not be, I very much stand by this. A tragic story arc or a negative character arc, it mustn't be that the plot drives the character to the negative arc, right? Because if there is nothing the character could have done, it's not a tragedy. It's the author bullying the character to all intents and purposes, right? There's no agency in the character and thus no downfall. But if there are a plethora of off ramps that the reader can see, but the character is so flawed that they look at those off ramps and go, no, I am committed. Then they are committed all the way down the daisy road to hell, you know, and that's, I feel like that is what makes the negative character arc very satisfying, in my opinion. So, I mean, Pirate Space Dragons is amazing. So I hope that helps Necromancer JM and Epic, and yeah, I mean, you know, and Latino. So I'm a big proponent of write strong characters, you know, and by strong characters I don't mean powerful characters. I don't mean characters that are strong at swords or magic or stuff like that. I mean, like, write characters that people are interested in. One of the most fascinating experiences I'm going through at the moment is in the second series that I'm writing. I've got four POV characters, and you know, I've got this up on Critique Circle where I've got my critiquers going through the story, and the character that I thought people would gravitate away from is, I would say it's about 50% of the critters' favorite character. And he starts in a terrible place, right? He was taken as a slave as a child. He was trained into, like, being a slave bodyguard, and then the wool is ripped out from under him and he's told he's free, and he cannot cope. He has got complete slave mentality, which is basically his whole arc. His whole arc is overcoming that, and it explores the philosophical questions around slave mentality and, you know, the complications and difficulties it causes. And he chooses immediately when the opportunity is offered, he latches back onto being a slave because he cannot cope with being free, right? And I was like, I don't know if people are gonna like this character. Like, I don't know if this is gonna work, because he's so broken, and like, are people gonna be able to relate to his immediately wanting to return to being controlled and a master? And yet it's people are loving that character because he is so broken, because he is in this terrible state. So he's in no way a powerful character, but he's a very strong character, and he's been given agency, and he's trying to avoid having agency, and that makes it a very he leaps off the page at people. So yeah, uh I hope that helps. Um, I'm a GM that's sort of fantasy setting for playing. Do you? Yes. So Leonard, I spoke about this a little earlier, but yes, I actually do, but only a little bit. So I'll just repeat it briefly because it's not a long spiel. So when you're creating a world as an author, you have to create the main characters, and you have to create main characters that readers will attach to. Right. So you're not going to create all the kind of dangling plot threads that you need in an RPG setting, because you don't need them. All you need is those characters and their plot. But when you are building for a role-playing game, you're not bringing characters. The players will bring their own characters. And so you have to provide more plot and less character. Right? And that's the approach you need to follow in an RPG setting. Is you have to have many plot threads that players can latch onto and kind of tweak and pull at. Yeah, I loved thank you so much, Mr. Tag Applied. Much appreciated. And I'm glad they helped you. um, Yeah, I also love Simon Mooncalf. I love Sorrow, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the series. I read it in university and it was wonderful. Um, right. I mean, it is understandable, but I mean, he is a very, like, Arma is a very, very broken character. And so, but it's been very interesting seeing people's reaction to him. And I'm glad that I rolled the dice, that I took the risk of writing him, because I was like looking at that character going, that's a lot of baggage, you know. Slavery, slave mentality. Do I have the gumption for what I'm biting off here? Because that's a big theme with a lot of baggage. So, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I took the risk on it. I think Arma is going to turn out to be an excellent character. So, um, so yeah. And yeah. So, so for those of you who joined late, just so you know, I am a little concerned about just-in-time world building. Not a lot. I'm not quitting, nothing like that. But the algorithm has not been very friendly recently. I have started a second channel where I will be dropping deep dive fantasy analysis videos once a month, only once a month. That's what I have time for. So the first video will go live next week, and it'll be like a deep dive into how the philosophy of Kashil's dart, which is love as thou wilt, is actually related to Stoicism and the kind of themes embedded in that story and so on. So if you guys are interested in checking out that channel and those videos, I'm going to drop the link in here again. The channel is called, actually, It Is That Deep, because, I thought it was funny. And yeah, that'll be all about content deep dives and stuff like that. It is not going to affect just-in-time world building schedule or anything. I just want to make sure that I have another presence, because YouTube has got a nasty way with people with a lot of evergreen content of dropping off their top views. Because the problem is that if more people watch your old content than your new content, then YouTube goes, oh well, your new content isn't as engaging, so I'm going to stop showing the thumbnails and so on. So the algorithm is sometimes a little inexplicable, and I don't want to have to completely start from scratch if YouTube entirely mothballs the channel. And I think that once a month I can absolutely do deep dives into fantasy content. Emotional stories. So have you considered writing an autistic character? On a principle of write what you know. Like, write a character who struggles. Start there. So I would start with what is most familiar with you. Like, how do you approach it? And then, kind of slowly kind of expand into other characters who are not autistic. And kind of play with it. So it's difficult when you obviously, like, you don't kind of go in the good way, in the same kind of emotional sphere as a lot of other people, and so you struggle to kind of connect people who are not autistic with a character. But start with writing an autistic character. Try that first. And then, once you've kind of settled into writing a bit, expand from there. Like I always advise, when you're starting out, write a character that is most kind of like yourself, just in the beginning, just to get started, and then slowly branch out from there. Because it's a lot like learning how to drive a car. So I drive stick shift. And when I learned how to drive, the first time you're trying to change gears while also trying to drive is crazy. You're like, where are my hands? Where are my feet? What is going on with the brakes? What am I even doing here? What is going on? Where is the stick supposed to go? But over time, you build up muscle memory. It's the same with writing. You start small, and over time, you you know you will build up the muscle memory, and it'll come easier. Everything comes easier. Um, how do you deal with the theme of science versus faith without sounding preachy? So, um, I I try very hard to have both sides represented well. So I will have, let's say I do science versus faith, right? Which I don't necessarily think is a conflict. You can have faith while still being actively engaged in science. It just means that your faith needs to be in a metaphysical entity or structure or whatever that is not impactful of science. Like, you can believe in a God, right, that created the universe and did all those things, um, and still be a scientist. So I don't think that's necessarily a contradiction. But if you do treat it as a contradiction, it's important that you represent all the views, right? So I have, like, when I have different faiths or whatever that are in conflict in my book, I try to have somebody who represents um, that point of view at the table, whether it's a point of view character or like a secondary character or something like that, somebody who speaks for the alternative point of view and who speaks coherently and cogently and makes good points, right? And and that allows the theme that you're looking for to naturally bubble to the surface rather than feel like it's the only point of view that's represented amongst the good guys, so therefore it's the only one that is valid. I think one of the biggest nitpicks I have with Star Wars, like if I was to like really like launch into Star Wars, well, I have two. One is that they never addressed the slavery question of droids, which I feel is like really they should have. And the other one is they never brought the Sith to the table. Star Wars presents the Jedi as the only viable option. Control of your emotion is your viable option. Now, in some of the books later on, the books that are now legend and no longer canon and so on, and I'm not bitter at all about that. I didn't at all very much love those books or anything. Anyway, so but the problem with the way that Star Wars represented the Sith and the Jedi is the Jedi are always the good guys, the Sith are always the bad guys. But really, that philosophy is about emotion versus control, right? Because the Jedi are all about like controlling your emotion and so on, and the Sith are all about leveraging your emotion. But if you take that to its logical conclusion, the Sith don't need to leverage negative emotions. They could leverage positive emotions. They could leverage love, for example, right? And use that to power their access to the Force. And I really feel that Star Wars did a disservice by never having a good Sith, a Sith that, you know, actually disputes the Jedi worldview, because it literally just presents one good worldview. Control your emotions. Control your emotions or perish. like we are all stoics here. So yeah. Um I hope that helps, Debbie. I hope that answers the question. Yes, some of the Legends books were amazing. I loved the Yuzong War. I was like that. It was so good. Um, so yeah. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. In case you didn't know, massive Star Wars nerd. So yeah, but that's the thing, right? Yoda not only tolerated slavery, but the thing is, they all the Jedi approach is such a controlled approach that they will tolerate anything. That they don't have a, a I mean, they have a code, but their code is about self-control. You know, it's yeah. I should do a deep dive into Star Wars on on actually it is that deep, and all of the thoughts around the philosophies um, that I have. Um, yeah, there in some of the expanded universe Latino, there are Force witches and things like that, like people who have figured out how to access the Force without um, without going through the Jedi and Sith traditions. So it has happened, but they often get hunted down by both the Jedi and the Sith, to be honest with you. So, yeah. um, so yeah, it could be maximal selflessness and maximal selfishness. That could be a valid approach to it, but I don't think it is well represented as such all the time. And that maximal selflessness gets you into the same kind of problems. It's what causes you to tolerate all kinds of things that perhaps you shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, I could yap for a long, long time about the philosophy of Star Wars. um, yeah, slavery is such a tricky question. Like, there's indentured servitude, there's slavery, there's debt slavery, there's chattel slavery, there's it, it's a complex beast to chattel, and it's to tackle, and it's one that comes with a heap of baggage. But my biggest problem with Star Wars and slavery is that droids are self-aware. Yeah, they are self-aware and sentient as far as we know. And they are fully, always bought and sold. They get restraining bolts fitted to them. Like, and that's never even addressed. I, that and Harry Potter, same problem. Yeah. So Harry Potter has got the house elves, right? She takes the Scottish brownie, which is a fairy tale creature, and she enslaves them. All right. As opposed to in the actual fairy tale myths, the brownie will look after a house as long as you act respectfully towards it, and it'll do chores and do all the rest of that. And if you offend it, it'll leave. Okay, so that's where the myth comes from. So she took brownies, JKR took brownies, and she made them house elves and enslaved them. All fine so far, Heavy themes make for good stories. Bipolaris, heavy themes make for good stories. Got no problems with that. Then she frees one of them, Dobby, and he starts, he and all good so far. All right, so we've got a free elf. He's working at being free. He's doing his thing. He's trying to get his stuff together and so on. But then she never goes anywhere with it. She doesn't go anywhere with it. And when Hermione tries to agitate for house elves to be freed, she is called woke, essentially. She's called a social justice warrior. And I'm like, okay. I mean, sure, white liberal women have done many things and spoken up for the rights of many people that they didn't have a right for. But saying that white liberal women shouldn't speak up against slavery is, well, it's certainly a take. It's an interesting take. um, and the thing is, she could have fixed it so easily. Like at the end, at just have some other house elves get behind Dobby's freedom. Just have some other house elves get behind Hermione's efforts to free her. And not a lot. It doesn't have to be a whole slave revolution, just a couple. And at the end, when Dobby dies, have a few of those house elves carry the torch of house elf freedom forward. That's all you have to do. Just like a hint that there will be an address of this evil. But she's I don't even know what, yeah. So if I and I don't often pick fights with Harry Potter because it's a very, people react very aggressively one way or another these days, and that's not really what I'm looking to do here. But I I do feel that that was a problem. Like that, and as I said, the Star Wars droid thing. They just wipe the droids' minds. Like, I understand that in the eyes of the law, they are not sentient, like Leonard says here. In the eyes of the law, these droids are not sentient. They're just possessions. They're a machine. But the way they're depicted on screen to us, the human viewer, is as characters, as sentient characters, even sentient characters with agency. And the thing is, the story isn't meant for the laws of the fictional people who live in the Republic. The story is meant for us. We are the consumers of the story. It's written for us, for modern human beings. So, what are you trying to say? You know? Yeah. Yeah, huge missed opportunity with Anakin becoming more robot and acknowledging that the loss of humanity doesn't mean the loss of personhood. Lots, 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 lots. I agree, Necromancer. I do think stories are at their best when they present scenarios rather than verdict, but I feel like the these stories miss the opportunity to present a scenario. They half set up a thing in their world and then just never actually in any way addressed it, didn't put a scenario up, they didn't do anything here. You know, they just left these non-humans in slavery. Yeah. Yeah. Households could have had a social lift. They could have, you know, there could have been some of them who decided to go into freedom. They could, like, it would have been so easy just to add a little bit extra, just a little bit extra, right? She just, I don't know. What is my process when creating a fantasy RPG setting? My process is to create factions, plots, and cultures. So when I'm creating for an RPG, I'm all about the factions, I'm all about the politics, the plots, and then the NPCs who populate those. So I try to create a world that has a myriad of plots and things and everything that's up and running, and then the world is in a steady state before the players hit it, right? But there are plots that are moving forward and that will move forward without player involvement. You know, if the players don't stop the plots, these are the things that'll happen. So, Leonard, what I would do is very simply, I would start with your cultures. I would start with what cultures you're going to put in the world, what factions exist in those cultures, and then step by step, just build them out one at a time. Um, that is the simplest way to build an RPG setting is to once you have your map, right? So you need a basic map, you need to understand how your magic system works, that kind of detail, right? So once you've got that stuff down, build your cultures, and within those cultures, build your factions and your subcultures and all of those elements. So yeah. Um, Worldbuilding Blueprints, the podcast will guide you as well as the book. um, so um, one at a time. I promise you, one at a time. I built a LARP world just by creating one culture a week for 3 months. There were a lot of cultures to create. One culture a week, and you'll get there. I promise you, you will. It's an onion process. Yeah, the only purpose was to make jokes about Hermione, and that was what what got to me. Yeah, so Worldbuilding Blueprints is well on schedule. It's with the editor right now, and I'm hoping that it will be able to be printed before Christmas. Depends a little bit on when I get it back from layouts, but otherwise it'll be printed early in January and be delivered very early in the new year. So, yeah. And I think that is a lot of yapping. Thank you very much for spending so much of your Saturday with me, guys. As always, it is an absolute pleasure. And thank you for being here. It, you know, um, this community is really been a joy, is a joy and a pleasure to interact with. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you and your points of view and so on, it's it's always a fascinating discussion, and a really great experience. So have a great weekend, and I'll catch you on Tuesday.